what choices do you make? Do you find yourself making certain decisions about a song form or arrangement or a melody that is new for you in this project? I mean, what is it about Golden Valley is now for you, like, that's really the most exciting thing as far as like this new form?
Oh, I think the sonic palette is different than anything. I think not improvising at all. So therefore, it's like being in a rock band, but there's no lyrics. So that's a different experience than I've had playing rock music. It's almost like, I mean, the idea is almost like a throwback to when instrumental music used to sometimes appear on some sort of pop chart, whether it was like the last time was maybe like the theme to Chariots of Fire or something. But the idea that you don't need words necessarily. And so that's a challenge in a way that to make something interesting that isn't also just a jam. None of these bands are jammy in any way. And that's almost like a dirty word for us. We don't want to put somebody through some long jam. This is just like we want to actually have a thing and a song. These are all these bands. The common thread, other than Buffalo Collision, is that they're all song bands. And it's one of the strengths of Happy Apple, I think, and Bad Plus, is the idea that it's avant-garde music essentially, but it uses contemporary classical elements, jazz elements, rock elements. We use these tools evenly, but ultimately the idea is that it's a celebration of a song too, not just a vehicle for your incredible blowing ability. It's really like a dialogue-based improvisation centered on a song. And that's actually not something that happens a lot in improvised music. The idea that the song is celebrated as much as your prowess on the saxophone, you know what I mean? Or, you can just shred anybody. But who cares if the music is boring and just laden with all your clever harmony? It's just like, we're really interested in that idea of a statement in and out,
Well, and you were talking earlier today when you were upstairs here, talking to a bunch of the students that are visiting and that are here, about how important that fellowship is the word you were using of in all these projects. These are people that you've got a deep, close friendship with over years, and just talk a little bit about how
these bands are an open challenge to the idea that individual virtuosity is the thing that basically lords over jazz to this day. The great jazz groups, the ones that you turn to, or at least I do, the Miles Davis Quintet of the 60s, the Coltrane Quartet, the classic Coltrane Quartet, Ornette Coleman's bands of the 60s, late 50s, the Keith Jarrett Trio, the Paul Motion Trio, which includes Bill Frisell. These are bands. You don't sub out. The Motion Trio doesn't play without Joe Lovano and Bill Frisell. These bands or the Keith Jarrett American Quartet, which would be probably my favorite, or most inspired by, which was in the early 70s, mid 70s, released several records on Impulse and whatever. The idea is that the band aesthetic, the fact that these people come together and make this certain sound, this is not as common as you'd think it would be, or it should be. It sounds so rational. It sounds so great, right? The idea that you get this person, this person, this person, they have a connection, and they come together and they make some new connection. That doesn't happen as much anymore. You have individuals that are firebrand, heavy chops. Maybe they have some sort of compositional concept or two, but ultimately, a lot of the time, and sometimes it's not their fault, but due to economic pressures, due to whatever. I mean, New York is a much more expensive city than it was in 1959, up through until the 80s. And in the 80s, you saw this start to happen, where things would splinter, and then the downtown scene started, where this group of people needed to get going. And then the Neo-Winton movement, which were incredible bands too, the early 80s, whatever. The whole idea is that the band is more powerful than the individual. And we were very drawn to that idea in Happy Apple and the Bad Plus and whatever, is the idea of committing. That's what all these bands do. They commit to each other. And the thread with all of these projects, that's why the nepotism runs high, is this is really a collective of very like-minded people that are all quite good friends. And in many ways, it's not this sort of like snarky Judd Apatow film thing. It's not like there's Seth Rogen again, you know, wow, and Paul Rudd's hanging out with him and they're smoking weed. It's none of that. It's like these you know, these connections are old, and they're based on the idea that the band is important, that the working relationship is more important than the individual virtuosity, and that we all give up as much as we want for ourselves, we give. And that's, man, you would be surprised as to how many leaders in bands need their solos to be they need you to kind of like politely lift them up. There's no polite anything going on in these bands. These bands, every member of these bands welcomes someone getting in their way, someone readjusting their view of what is happening in the moment. Buffalo Collision is an absolute ground zero version of this, of at any moment someone will take your idea from you, if you like it or not, or if you can work with it. But it's not done in an aggressive way. It's not done in a way of dominance. It's done in the way of the service, the moment, and that's what all these bands are based on. Happy Apple, there's not a moment where you're being politely comped. You know, you're like, Eric, please take a solo, you know. It's much more like, what can we do together here, you know, that can strengthen us and strengthen the experience for people. And we believe that is it. And I believe ultimately the success of a band like the Bad Plus or a band like Happy Apple is based on the idea that it's a committed ensemble that turned down other gigs to do gigs together and charged plane tickets and slept on the floors and did the van tours and did the whatever. And in the way that any one of these people could be playing as John Scofield's bass player or whoever, you know, name it, you know. That's accessible. It's all these people are deciding, no, this is a band, we're going to dedicate ourselves to this, and hopefully we can create some sort of sound that's bigger than ourselves.